racist principal shaves the Rock's daughter's hair for fun, but when the Rock arrived, when a 15-year-old girl walks into school wearing her braids with pride, she doesn't expect that just minutes later, her dignity and identity will be stripped away by the very person meant to protect them. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. On the morning of Wednesday, October 12th, soft sunlight covered the courtyard of Hamilton Academy, a prestigious high school located in the northern suburbs of Sacramento, California. With a student body that was over 72% white and only around 6% black, Hamilton had long been known for its strict dress code, a policy that black and brown parents had often criticized as biased and coded. Rosalind Johnson, 15 years old, daughter of famed actor Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, stepped through the school's black iron gates in a crisp school uniform. But what made her stand out wasn't her last name or who her father was. It was her hair, intricately braided Fulani style, adorned with tiny white beads at the ends, delicate yet dignified. Each braid was a symbol of tradition, a memory of her late mother, who had once taught Rosalind, "Your hair is your crown, your root, your history." But not everyone saw it with pride. Just 15 minutes after the first bell, her name rang through the school's PA system. "Rosalind Johnson, please report to the principal's office." Rosalind thought for a moment it must be a mistake. Principal Richard Galt's office was tucked away at the end of the third-floor hallway, a frosted glass door with a gold-plated nameplate that read Principal Galt, as silent as always. But inside, the air felt shrunken and tight. He was standing, arms crossed, holding a brand-new electric clipper, sleek, black, gleaming, as if prepared for a purpose no one dared to imagine. "We have standards at this school," he said, his voice flat like a memorized line. "And what's on your head? It doesn't align with the learning environment." "Sir, I read the handbook," Rosalind replied, her voice soft. "There's nothing in it that bans braids. This is how my mother used to do my hair. It's cultural, not fashion." Galt didn't listen. He didn't ask, didn't debate. He walked over, pressed gently on her shoulder to seat her, then flipped the switch. The machine buzzed to life, dry, sharp, metallic, echoing across the quiet room. No one stopped him. 2 administrative staff witnessed the entire act, but said nothing. In less than 4 minutes, braid after braid fell to the floor like severed pieces of memory. Rosalind didn't cry out, didn't scream, but her eyes shattered. Out in the hallway, a group of students heard strange noises from the room. They crept closer, peeking through the glass window. A student named Keisha managed to pull out her phone, her hands trembling as she recorded the unthinkable moment. A sophomore gasped, "Is he shaving her head? Because of her hair?" Another said nothing, just wept. Rosalind emerged minutes later, gray hoodie pulled over her head. She walked straight ahead, eyes down. But behind her, the hallway was already pulsing with whispers, buzzing phones, and a quiet fury about to erupt. Within a single class period, an ordinary student, with good grades and no disciplinary record, had been turned into the target of a punishment meant to be symbolic. And what hurt most was this. It had all begun over traditional braids, a cultural legacy deemed a violation. No one at Hamilton Academy knew that just hours later, the school's doors would receive a father not just bearing outrage, but a moral earthquake. And the flame just sparked would soon burn through a system that had slept too long. At exactly 11:12 a.m., in a private gym tucked away in Brentwood, Los Angeles, where sunlight poured through tall glass windows and the clang of iron weights echoed steadily like a heartbeat, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was wrapping up his third workout of the day. Sweat dripped from his brow to his shoulders, soaking into the white towel wrapped around his powerful hands. He didn't know that. Just seconds later, his heart would seize tighter than the most dangerous muscle cramp he'd ever experienced. His iPhone buzzed softly on the leather bench beside him. A video notification appeared. No title, no caption, no explanation. The sender was an unfamiliar account named KJ.Hamilton10, a student. His father's instinct made him open it instantly. The screen came to life, a 30-second clip. Every second clawed into his mind. His daughter, Rosalind Johnson, 15 years old, sat in a chair in the principal's office, her eyes wide with panic, but trying to remain composed. Principal Richard Galt, a middle-aged man in a white shirt and striped tie, stood behind her, holding a black electric clipper as if it were a symbol of authority. A dry, piercing buzz rang out as the blades touched Rosalind's hair, and in that moment, the Rock's world froze. His hand clenched so tightly that the water bottle beneath his grip exploded, water spraying onto his silver-gray sneakers. He didn't scream, he didn't roar, but all the life in him compressed into one singular thought. No one touches my daughter and gets away with it. He rose abruptly, like a boulder suddenly in motion. The black hoodie was thrown over his shoulders. His hand slid across the phone, searching for the nearest manager's name. But then he stopped. He didn't need interference. He didn't need media. This wasn't a movie star's story. This was a father's story. A father whose daughter had been humiliated inside a school, labeled as safe. The black Cadillac SUV shot out from the underground parking garage, tore through Sunset Boulevard, then merged onto the northbound I-15. He didn't turn on the radio. He didn't take any calls. His grip on the steering wheel was so tight, it seemed he could crush the metal itself. Every minute ticking by was a verdict pounding inside his chest. Questions with no answers. Why didn't anyone stop it? Why didn't anyone call her parents? Why was hair the reason a child was shaved in front of staff? No one outside could truly grasp what the Rock was experiencing in that moment. Not because he was famous or a legendary athlete, but because he had once been a black boy, growing up in a system that always tried to mold him into invisibility. And now, it was happening again. To his daughter, in the 21st century, in a state supposedly progressive. At 11:26 a.m., less than 3 blocks from Hamilton Academy, the Rock pulled over to the side of the road. He closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds, inhaled, exhaled, placed his heart back into his chest as if preparing for a life-or-death match. But this time, there were no spotlights, no audience, only truth, dignity, and the righteous fury of a father. A father who had just received a message, not in words, but in images, telling him that a piece of his daughter's identity had been stripped away. And he was coming, not for revenge, but to redefine justice. At exactly 11:30 a.m., the front doors of the Hamilton Academy Administrative Building thundered open like a lightning strike. The thick wooden panels slammed back against the walls, shaking the entire office. Staff looked up in shock, a few nearly dropping their coffee cups. The Rock stood there, towering, broad-shouldered, his presence filling the doorway. His gaze burned through the air. No bodyguards, no entourage, just him, and a fury frozen like cracked mountain stone. Principal Richard Galt, seated behind a mahogany desk, looked up slowly, as if he'd been expecting this moment. He remained in place, fingers interlocked, legs crossed, a smirk resting on his face. "I was wondering how long it would take you to get here," he said, as if the father standing before him were a late guest at some formal gathering. The Rock didn't answer. He walked straight toward the desk, each step landing like a seismic tremor. Where's Rosalind? His voice was low, deep, and carried not a hint of uncertainty. Just 4 simple words, but they carried the weight of a verdict. A door inside the office creaked open. Rosalind stepped out. Slowly, her hands tucked into the pockets of her gray hoodie. Her head had been shaved clean. Red marks still lined her scalp from a blade that was too sharp and too cold. Her eyes met her father's, and in that moment, the entire room fell silent. No sobbing, no yelling, just a father seeing a wound that wasn't on the skin, but buried deep in his daughter's dignity. The Rock turned, his eyes shifting from his daughter to the man who caused it all. "You humiliated my daughter," he said, every word slicing through the school's polished code of conduct like a blade. Not because she was wrong, but because you thought she didn't look like you, and therefore didn't belong here. Galt shrugged, replying with feigned indifference. "She violated the dress code. I enforced the policy. Your family doesn't get to demand special treatment." The Rock tilted his head, stepping forward again, close enough that Galt instinctively leaned back in his chair. "I'm not asking for special treatment," he replied. "I'm demanding dignity." Just then, a soft knock came at the door. Vice Principal Keller, who had remained silent throughout the incident, entered with a pale face, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Mr. Galt, perhaps this isn't the right time." "Get out," Galt snapped, trying to command control with tone instead of truth. The Rock didn't look at Keller. His eyes never left Galt. "You think you are the rules, but the real law is standing in front of you, and it doesn't need clippers." Rosalind stood quietly at his side, fingers gripping the hem of her hoodie. 1,000 questions were trapped inside her, but when she looked at her father's back, solid like a fortress, she understood she wasn't alone. At exactly 11:30 a.m., the front doors of the Hamilton Academy Administrative Building thundered open like a lightning strike. The thick wooden panels slammed back against the walls, shaking the entire office. Staff looked up in shock, a few nearly dropping their coffee cups. The Rock stood there, towering, broad-shouldered, his presence filling the doorway. His gaze burned through the air. No bodyguards, no entourage, just him, and a fury frozen like cracked mountain stone. Principal Richard Galt, seated behind a mahogany desk, looked up slowly, as if he'd been expecting this moment. He remained in place, fingers interlocked, legs crossed, a smirk resting on his face. "I was wondering how long it would take you to get here," he said, as if the father standing before him were a late guest at some formal gathering. The Rock didn't answer. He walked straight toward the desk, each step landing like a seismic tremor. "Where's Rosalind?" His voice was low, deep, and carried not a hint of uncertainty. Just 4 simple words, but they carried the weight of a verdict. A door inside the office creaked open. Rosalind stepped out. Slowly, her hands tucked into the pockets of her gray hoodie. Her head had been shaved clean. Red marks still lined her scalp from a blade that was too sharp and too cold. Her eyes met her father's, and in that moment, the entire room fell silent. No sobbing, no yelling, just a father seeing a wound that wasn't on the skin, but buried deep in his daughter's dignity. The Rock turned, his eyes shifting from his daughter to the man who caused it all. "You humiliated my daughter," he said, every word slicing through the school's polished code of conduct like a blade. "Not because she was wrong, but because you thought she didn't look like you, and therefore didn't belong here." Galt shrugged, replying with feigned indifference. "She violated the dress code. I enforced the policy. Your family doesn't get to demand special treatment." The Rock tilted his head, stepping forward again, close enough that Galt instinctively leaned back in his chair. "I'm not asking for special treatment," he replied. I'm demanding dignity." Just then, a soft knock came at the door. Vice Principal Keller, who had remained silent throughout the incident, entered with a pale face, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Mr. Galt, perhaps. This isn't the right time." "Get out!" Galt snapped, trying to command control with tone instead of truth. The Rock didn't look at Keller. His eyes never left Galt. "You think you are the rules, but the real law is standing in front of you, and it doesn't need clippers." Rosalind stood quietly at his side, fingers gripping the hem of her hoodie. 1,000 questions were trapped inside her. But when she looked at her father's back, solid like a fortress, she understood she wasn't alone. Galt folded his arms, trying to maintain composure, but his lips had begun to dry. He attempted to deflect. "You're causing a scene. This is an administrative meeting, not an action film. Are you here to intimidate?" The Rock leaned in, face just inches from Galt's. His voice lowered, steady and cold as a pin drop in a wooden room. "No, I'm here to make sure that what you just did will be the last time in your life you ever get to do anything like that to any child." At 11:33 a.m., the principal's office was no longer just an office. It had become the first courtroom for a system far too used to hiding behind emotionless policies. And the story had only just begun. 11:50 a.m. Less than 20 minutes had passed since the Rock stormed into the principal's office like a targeted thunderstorm. But outside, in the third-floor hallway, another wave had begun to rise. Silent, powerful, and unstoppable. An 11th grade student named Tyler Matthews was the first to upload the clip to TikTok. The video was exactly 19 seconds long, showing Rosalind walking out of the office, hoodie pulled over her head, silently moving through the hallway as if the world had just turned its back on her. Below the video, a brief but explosive caption read, "Principal Galt shaved the Rock's daughter's head. And now he's here." Within 11 minutes, the video had gained over 87,000 views. By the 20th minute, it had surpassed 1.2 million, and the number kept climbing. The hashtags #Justice for Rosalind and #This is not just. Hair shot straight into California's top 3 trending topics. On Instagram, a student account posted a side-by-side photo, one of Rosalind from last year's talent show, where she recited a poem about heritage in our hair, next to her current image. The caption read, "They cut her hair, but not her memories." On Twitter, students began sharing their own experiences of being targeted by Richard Galt or witnessing others punished unfairly. A Muslim student named Lila wrote, "He made me remove my hijab, saying it was a barrier to communication. I cried for a week." A 10th grade boy posted an old picture of his dreadlocks, recounting how he was banned from the basketball team for not fitting the school's image. A Ghanaian student recalled, "He once said I sounded like a savage. It was my first and last time speaking in English class." The tweets spread like wildfire, posts with photos, videos, even old audio clips. Everything turned into a tidal wave crashing down on the image of power Galt had spent years constructing. In the school library, a group of students quietly printed out signs with bold letters. "My hair doesn't bother you, but his stare does." In the cafeteria, a white student stood up before lunch and declared, "If Rosalind gets shaved for her culture, then we are living in a place that is not safe." The speech lasted just 57 seconds, but the entire room erupted in thunderous applause. A teacher secretly recorded it and sent it to the local newspaper. By 12:15, nearly every student in grades 10, 11, and 12 knew what had happened. A group of Rosalind's closest friends, calling themselves Circle 4, launched an Instagram account named it Voice for Rosalind, updating the situation every hour. Within just 3 hours, it had amassed 62,000 followers. Messages like, "It's not just hair. You don't get to define professionalism by hair color or skin tone. She is one of us," flooded every post. No one could have predicted that a quiet hallway that morning would become the starting point for a student movement, unlike anything the school had ever seen. Handwritten signs began appearing across the campus, taped to walls, stuck on classroom doors, hung on the main gate's fence. One group of students created a photo timeline with 15 images of Rosalind, from 6th to 10th grade, titled, "They took her hair, but not her childhood." And deeper than any image or number, a shared feeling began to take root in the hearts of the students. Their outrage had finally stopped being afraid. For the first time, students weren't whispering about discrimination. For the first time, they were speaking it aloud. And this time, people were listening. At exactly 11:55 a.m., while the third-floor hallway of Hamilton Academy buzzed with the murmurs of students and the constant click of phone cameras, a silver SUV with no commercial plates pulled up neatly in front of the main gate. 3 people stepped out, a woman in a navy blue blazer, accompanied by 2 men carrying document cases and legal identification badges. The woman was Serafina Ramos, superintendent of the Elmont County School District, one of Northern California's largest, overseeing more than 73 public schools and 129,000 students. She was known as someone who didn't speak much, but always signed at the right moment. And this time, she hadn't come to observe. She had come to act. As soon as she entered the main doors, a teacher pointed her way. "Principal's office, 3rd floor, end of the hall." She didn't nod, didn't thank. She just walked. Her firm footsteps echoed against the stone floor like the beating of a war drum. The 3rd floor, where everything had exploded. The door to the principal's office was already ajar as she approached. Galt was standing, still trying to regain control in front of the rock, but his expression shifted instantly when he saw Ramos. Her eyes swept across the room, from the cold fluorescent lights to Rosalind's taut face, and finally to Galt's hands, still resting limply on the desk. She didn't sit, didn't preface, didn't greet. "You, Richard Galt, are hereby suspended immediately for abuse of authority and displays of racial discrimination." Galt opened his mouth, ready to object, but Ramos raised a hand, signaling for silence. One of the attorneys beside her opened his case and produced an official document, already signed, bearing the red seal of the district office. No on-site appeal allowed, no delay permitted. "You no longer have access to students, staff, or internal data systems until an independent investigation is concluded," Ramos continued, her voice smooth and abrasive, like sand scraping glass. "If you remain in this building longer than 30 more minutes, we will initiate legal enforcement." Rosalind stood quietly beside her father. Only now did Galt look over at her, not with scorn, but with a gasping, unsteady stare. He had never imagined there would be a day when his power would be stripped away in broad daylight, and by a woman, a high-ranking woman of color, whom he had quietly dismissed in district board meetings. Within the next 15 minutes, news raced across the school like lightning. The teacher network sent out an internal alert. Principal Richard Galt has been officially suspended by the Elmont District Board. On social media, students live-streamed from the hallway. The hashtag #GaltOutNow began trending alongside Justice for Rosalind. By 12:30 p.m., over 400 students had gathered in the main hallway and the staircase leading to the back courtyard. No one organized it, no one directed it, but everyone carried blank sheets of paper, markers, and handmade cardboard signs. One sign read, "My hair doesn't disrupt class, but discrimination does." Another said, "We're not your image. We are our identity." Ms. Halbert, a literature teacher with 34 years in the profession, stood silently, watching her students chant, Stand with Rosalind, her voice hoarse from emotion. I've witnessed hundreds of injustices buried quietly, she told a younger colleague. But this is the first time I've seen students rise, not for grades, not for attention, but for a friend's dignity. At the end of the hallway, Rosalind looked out from the office window and saw her friend standing in the crowd. No one called her name, but every face carried the same message. We are here. We are not silent anymore. And this time, justice isn't moving slowly. At 3:15 p.m., inside the main auditorium of Hamilton Academy, a space once familiar with school talent shows and choir performances, there was no singing today, no sound of piano keys. The overhead lights were dimmed, casting a soft glow over an empty stage where a single wooden podium stood, one lone microphone, and rows upon rows of students and teachers filling every aisle and staircase. Over 650 people were present in person, with hundreds more watching via live streams broadcast on hallway and library TVs. The incident from that morning had already become the centerpiece of local news, and the interim administration had hastily organized a school-wide address, initially meant only to reassure students. But when Serafina Ramos asked The Rock if he would speak, and he agreed, everything changed instantly. The Rock stepped out, not in a suit, not wearing sunglasses, no bodyguards. Just a father, dressed in a black t-shirt and gray jeans, holding the mic in his hand. The applause welcoming him lasted less than 10 seconds, but the silence that followed, thick, breathless, hung in the room like the weight before an explosion. Rosalind broke no rules, he began, his voice low, steady, and free of theatrics. She walked into class with her hair braided the way her mother used to do it. That wasn't fashion, that was heritage. The mic crackled softly. Someone in the crowd nodded. A young teacher dabbed her eyes with a tissue. The Rock paused for a moment. Then he continued, slow and sharp as a blade. They can take the hair off a child's head, but they can't take away her dignity. They can't strip the roots from a human being. The front rows shifted with deep inhales, and then, as if on cue, Rosalind slowly rose from her seat among the students. She removed her gray hoodie. The light caught her bare scalp, once adorned with braids rich in cultural memory, now marked only by red lines, like battle scars. The entire auditorium held its breath. A student clapped first alone, then 2, then 10, until the entire room erupted in applause, as if a hero had returned from the front lines. Rosalind said nothing. She just stood there, silent. But her silence rang louder than any shout. She was not a victim. Not anymore. She was proof. The Rock turned back to the mic. I was once a child told to be softer, less intimidating. Now I'm a father watching my daughter be called unfit. But I didn't come here today to be angry. I came here to say, enough. He extended his arm toward his daughter. Rosalind is my child. But today she stands for anyone who's ever been told they were too different to belong. And you, Alu, of you, are the ones who can change that. A 12th grader named Mason, once punished for dyeing his hair red, began to cry. A brown-skinned girl named Briella clutched her friend tightly. No one spoke aloud, but everyone understood. This wasn't just about Rosalind. This was about them. After the speech, a 3-minute and 17-second clip was edited and uploaded with the title, "Hair is not rebellion, it's roots." In the first 6 hours, the video reached 8.4 million views and was shared by public figures like Kerry Washington, LeBron James, and Ava DuVernay. A tweet by renowned black journalist Jamal Anderson read, "Today, I saw a girl say nothing, and the whole nation listened." That rise didn't begin with a slogan. It began with a shaved head and a heart that refused to stay silent. 2 days after The Rock's powerful speech, and Rosalind's unstoppable rise, while public outrage continued to swell and the hashtag numbered Justice for Rosalind remained among the top 10 national trends. In a temporary rental apartment on the northern outskirts of Sacramento, Richard Galt sat alone in the dark, the glow of his laptop casting pale light across his face. Suspended, exposed by the media, and fully condemned by the students he once ruled over, Galt didn't choose silence or reflection. Instead, he opted for the lowest route, smearing the victim. In an anonymous email, he sent a batch of fabricated documents to over a dozen tabloid-style education blogs. Attached were 3 poorly doctored images suggesting Rosalind was disruptive in class, slamming books, and swearing at a teacher. One of the images was blatantly from 2017, when Rosalind was still in 4th grade, her younger face clumsily inserted into the backdrop of a current classroom. In the email, Galt wrote, "I didn't act harshly for no reason. This girl has a history of behavioral issues and is using her father's influence to dodge discipline." He even attached an official-looking document with a red stamp, quickly revealed by tech journalists to be altered using free editing software. A popular blog specializing in school-related scandals, Inside Edu, refused to publish it. The editor responded privately via email. "You think people will believe you after what just happened? This is the Rock's daughter. The whole country is watching. Nobody's buying this." Another blog, Campus Scope, went further. They published the entire anonymous email from Galt, along with the IP address traced directly to the area where he was staying. The headline pinned to the top of their homepage read, "He shaved her head, and now he wants to strip away her dignity too." The internet erupted. Within 3 hours, more than 18,000 comments poured in beneath the article. One user wrote, "Her hair hasn't even started growing back, and he's already reopening the wound?" A mother in Chicago reposted it, adding, "I was once forced to remove my hijab in middle school. Now I hear my daughter ask, 'Mom, why does my hair scare people?' I want to thank Rosalind and send a message to Galt. We're not silent anymore." That same evening, The Rock posted a live video from his living room. No background music, no production, just a father, under warm lighting, his face firm and resolute. "You think you can rebuild your credibility by making up lies about a 15-year-old girl," he said, staring straight into the camera. "You didn't take away my daughter's voice. All you did was make it echo further." He held up his phone and read a message from a student at Hamilton Academy. "Thank you, Rosalind, for making me not ashamed of my hair anymore." Then he looked back at the camera. "This is something you'll never understand, because you've never been forced to hide who you are." The video reached 6.1 million views in just 8 hours. Official Twitter accounts from civil rights organizations like the NAACP, actors like Viola Davis, and activists such as Brittany Packnett Cunningham all reshared it. One post from a national education organization read, "We are witnessing a movement, not led by politicians, but by a brave child and a father who will not back down." Richard Galt attempted a short interview with a small local YouTube channel, trying to explain, "I was just following school policy. This whole thing has been overly politicized." But the video showed a shaken man, his voice trembling. When the reporter asked, "Don't you think shaving a young girl's head was crossing a line?" he stammered, "It's just hair." That phrase became the next punchline. People began posting pictures of Rosalind next to the caption, "It's not just hair. It's history. It's an honor. It's a voice." And this time, that voice had grown too loud for anyone to silence. 8 a.m. on Monday, the largest hall at the Elmont Board of Education headquarters was packed to capacity. All 3 seating sections had been full since 7:30. Microphones were checked repeatedly, and the large screen behind the hearing podium displayed the headline, "Disciplinary Hearing. Richard Galt, principal of Hamilton Academy. This was no longer a procedural meeting. This was a public tribunal of community justice. In the front row, the Rock sat beside Rosalind. His hand rested lightly on the back of her chair, a gesture both protective and empowering. Rosalind wore no hood, held her head high. Her hair had not yet fully grown back, but the strength in her gaze was firmer than anyone else's in the room. Representing the board, Susan Linwood, the chair of the Elmont School District Ethics Committee, opened with a cold declaration. We are here to determine whether Mr. Richard Galt's actions violated the ethical standards and student protection policies of the Elmont School District. Galt, seated to the right, wore a gray suit, arms folded on the table. Beside him sat his private attorney, a young man with a tense expression, furiously taking notes. Galt did not glance around, did not look at Rosalind. He kept his eyes fixed on the documents in front of him, as if trying to hold on to the last remnants of his vanished authority. The first witness called was Amara Tesfaye, an 11th grader of Ethiopian descent. She trembled slightly as she held the microphone, but her voice was clear. Last year, during my history presentation, Mr. Galt walked into the class. After I finished, he said, "Your voice sounds like you're singing tribal music." The whole class laughed. I laughed too. But that night, I didn't speak to anyone at home. Whispers rippled from the back of the room. The second witness was Julian Carter, a 10th grader of Jamaican heritage. He spoke in a flat tone, as if he'd told this story far too many times. "I got called to the principal's office just for wearing a knit beanie," he said. "A hat like that looks like you're dealing something." I didn't know what something he meant, but I knew what he meant. A special witness was invited, the older sister of an 8th grade student named Nina, who was still a minor. She held up a photo, Nina's tightly braided hair, adorned with traditional wooden beads. This was taken the day before Mr. Galt called her a gang culture student in front of the class. She begged our mom to transfer schools after her first week. The room grew as heavy as a courtroom, and then came Rosalind's turn. She stood and walked straight to the podium. No paper, no phone. Just her hands gently clasped together, and a voice steadier than most adults. He didn't see me as a student. He didn't see my hair as beautiful. He didn't hear my voice as a voice. He saw a flaw, something to be corrected, something to be shaved off. And he did it without asking, without calling my parents, without thinking about what it would do to me. Rosalind drew a breath, then continued, "But I am not a mistake. I am my whole self, and I don't need him to edit me." Her voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the entire room. By the end of the hearing, Galt's attorney mumbled a weak defense, that the school had grooming policies, that Mr. Galt acted in the school's best interest, that this incident was being exaggerated. But then came the final question from the board. "Do you have any written warning issued before the act of shaving Rosalind's hair?" Galt lowered his head. The attorney hesitated. "No, we do not." 10 minutes later, the board cast its vote, 100% in agreement. Susan Linwood announced the result before over 700 attendees. Mr. Richard Galt is hereby permanently dismissed from all administrative roles within the Elmont education system. He will also be placed on the statewide administrative watch list. The entire hall rose to its feet. Applause erupted like fireworks. No one stayed seated. Amid the crowd, the Rock gently pulled his daughter into an embrace. No one needed to say a word. For the first time in her life, a child once deemed needing to be cut away had made an entire system bow its head. 3 weeks after the disciplinary hearing that shook the media, the atmosphere at Hamilton Academy had begun to settle. The hallways felt brighter, and conversations between students and teachers were less tense. A new program on cultural awareness in schools had just been approved by the board, initiated by Serafina Ramos herself. Rosalind, though not yet officially back in class, was welcomed like a hero every time she appeared on campus. But then, on the Monday morning of the 4th week after the incident, a strangely familiar name appeared in the internal email system. Interim Principal, Matthew Galt. Accompanying it was a brief introduction. Former academic advisor at Broward Prep Academy, Florida. Just hours later, as Rosalind was heading to the library, she passed by the front desk and felt her chest tighten. The man sitting behind the counter, hair neatly combed, wearing a navy suit, had a face that brought all the worst memories rushing back. Though nearly 10 years younger than Richard, the eyes, the faint, crooked smile. They were eerily alike. "Good morning," Matthew Galt smiled, extending his hand, as if this meeting were pleasant. "If I'm not mistaken, you're Rosalind. It's a pleasure to work with you. I'm not my brother." Rosalind didn't shake his hand. She simply nodded and walked away, but she couldn't stop the chill that ran down her spine. The news spread like lightning. Students whispered in every hallway, "That's his brother? How did anyone approve this? Didn't the school learn its lesson?" The Rock received a text from his daughter with just 2 words. "He's here." Less than 30 minutes later, he appeared at the school. He didn't burst through the doors like last time, but his steps were still purposeful, weighted, as if each tile beneath him had to brace itself. Matthew greeted him with a calm smile. "Mr. Johnson, I understand your concerns, but rest assured, I'm here to clean up what's left behind, not to continue it." The Rock stared deep into the younger man's eyes and said, "Fire doesn't only come from the one who lights it. Sometimes it comes from the one who stands too close." But Matthew's polished words didn't last long. During an internal meeting between the leadership team and teachers on Thursday of that same week, he made a remark he thought was private, but was recorded by a support teacher in the room. "We can't let this victim circus run the school. This is an institution, not a social stage." The recording lasted less than 45 seconds, but it was enough to spark a storm. That very night, the clip was shared on the Instagram account at Voice for Rosalind, with the caption, "One Galt wasn't enough? This is what happens when you let ghosts return in a different form." The hashtag number sign removed Galt 2-shot to number 2 on the statewide trend list within 6 hours. An online petition demanding Matthew's suspension gained over 370,000 signatures in just 24 hours. Hamilton alumni posted en masse, "We didn't speak up for our kids to suffer the same thing." On Friday morning, Serafina Ramos called an emergency meeting. No prior notice. When Matthew walked into the room in his tailored suit, he didn't expect to find not only board members, but also parent representatives, the district's legal counsel, and, seated in the observation row with her head held high, Rosalind Johnson. The meeting lasted only 40 minutes. Ramos announced, with clear audio evidence and failure to disclose a prior civil investigation related to racial discrimination against black students at his previous job, Mr. Matthew Galt is hereby terminated immediately, without conditions. Furthermore, the board will implement a new vetting process for all administrative candidates, including cultural and human rights background checks. Matthew stood up, said nothing. His eyes swept past Rosalind, this time no longer arrogant, just hollow and lost. As he exited through the side door, a student outside held up a sign. "A head of hair can't be shaved twice, and this voice will not be silenced again." And just like that, the ghost Galt Nolt, matter what form it wore, had no place left at Hamilton. No more. Not ever again. In February, amid the needle-sharp cold of Washington, D.C., more than 900 delegates from 48 states gathered at the National Convention Center for the United States Education Equity Conference, a gathering of top policymakers, activists, and educators. But this year, the most mentioned name wasn't a governor, nor the Secretary of Education. It was that of a 15-year-old girl, Rosalind Johnson. On the main government stage, adorned in blue and silver, the glowing words behind the podium read, "Keynote Session, Identity, Power, and What Our Schools Are Still Getting Wrong." And when the host announced, Rosalind Johnson, Student, National Policy Changer, the entire auditorium rose to its feet. Rosalind walked out, her head still shaved, uncovered, unapologetic. She wore an ivory-white suit, high-collared, sleek and refined. No colors, no accessories, but radiating a quiet power no one could fake. She stood before the microphone, looking out at the audience below, people who had written policy, signed off on legislation, and those who once turned a blind eye when students were harmed by those very rules. "They said I violated the rules," Rosalind began, her voice ringing clear as a bell through the hall. "But no one could show me which rule said my cultural heritage didn't belong in the classroom." The room fell silent. Then she continued, each word like a hammer striking memory. "The truth is, they weren't afraid of my hair. They were afraid I was different and dared to be seen." The quote was immediately captured and posted on Twitter by a Washington Post journalist, becoming the week's most shared tweet. They were afraid I was different and dared to be seen. For the next 7 minutes, Rosalind didn't tell a personal story. She presented hard data. 41% of students of color have been reprimanded for inappropriate hair or clothing, even when no rule was broken. Over 60 lawsuits in 5 years have been filed by students discriminated against for braids, dreadlocks, or religious head coverings. And 0 federal laws currently protect students' cultural hair rights in public schools. She paused, eyes lowered. I used to be one of those zeros, but today, I stand here to make sure that number doesn't repeat for other children. The entire hall rose again, this time not out of sympathy, but deep respect. That very evening, during a closed meeting between state representatives and the Department of Education, a new legislative proposal was unveiled, the Rosalind Amendment. The amendment mandates all public schools must protect cultural hair rights as part of personal identity. All forms of disciplinary action related to culturally, ethnically, or religiously significant hairstyles are banned. Annual mandatory cultural awareness training for all school administrators. Within just 1 week, 5 states, California, Illinois, New York, Georgia, and Oregon, announced they would bring the Rosalind Amendment to a vote within 60 days. One legislator remarked, "It's strange that it took a 15-year-old girl to teach adults about freedom. But that's exactly why she's the right person to lead." At Hamilton Academy, the central hallway was transformed. A new mural, painted by senior art students, showed Rosalind, bald, standing in a circle of students from every background: black, white, Asian, brown, students with disabilities. Each wore their hair the way they chose. Above them was a bold, unmistakable line. "They took my hair, but I gave voice back to all of us." At the year-end graduation ceremony, Rosalind was invited to speak on behalf of the student body. She stood before hundreds and said simply, "I may have lost my hair, but what I gained was a whole new language, one that doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand still and never apologize for who it is." And from that moment on, in thousands of schools across America, whenever a student is questioned about their hair, they can say, "I have this right. Because Rosalind stood up, I wouldn't have to stand alone." At last, something had begun to change. Join us in sharing powerful stories by hitting like and subscribing. And don't forget to turn on notifications to start each morning with meaningful lessons and heartfelt empathy.